Nice.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Reality Project New York City Metro Chapter March chapter meeting. Plastics No Escape. While we're waiting for people to enter the meeting, please go ahead and share your name, pronouns, borough, and one way you reduce plastic consumption into the chat. And we'll get started very shortly.
Excellent.
All right, in the interest of
All right.
time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So a little bit about our chapter. If you are new to our chapter, we, oops, sorry. We mobilize New Yorkers toward a just transition to end the era of fossil fuels. And we're the first and largest chapter with about 1,600 members across the 5 boroughs, 800 of whom attended a climate reality training. And what we do, we are a volunteer-run chapter that holds events such as panel discussions, climate-related field trips, volunteer outings, and other in-person events where members can connect, network, and be inspired by each other. So one of the ways that you can stay up to date with our chapter is by bookmarking our link tree. And Paula's going to share that in the chat. And here you'll find links to follow all of our social media accounts, as well as links to our upcoming events and actions. And while we're here, I'd like to alert you to a couple of actions that you can take right now. First, there's an emergency rally in Albany on Wednesday, March 25th, which is a week from today, to urge New York State lawmakers to defend the CLCPA, our state climate law. Buses will be departing from Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, as well as from other parts of the state. So we'll be dropping that link in the chat where you can sign up to attend this emergency rally next week. And second, if you can't make it to the emergency rally, you can fill out this form to urge New York lawmakers to defend the climate law and support energy affordability in the budget. So whether you're attending the rally or not, you can still fill out the form. And we thank you for taking action. Okay, so before we get into today's presentation, we'd like to share some great news on a recent climate win. The New York State Board of Regents unanimously approved a statewide climate education requirement, and this will go into effect in the 2027 to 2028 school year for grades 5 through 12, and then the year after that for grades K through 4. And this makes New York the second state in the nation after New Jersey to require cross-curricular K through 12 climate education. So this is a huge win. So big thanks and big congratulations to the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force for this victory, which was years in the making. And many members of this task force are also members of our chapter. So we're very excited and very proud about this news. Okay, on to our presentation. I'm very excited and pleased to introduce Rachana Shah. Rachana has been a zero waste educator and consultant since 2018, teaching audiences from corporate offices to restaurant kitchens to public schools to faith groups and others about the direct connection between waste reduction and climate change mitigation and meaningfulness. She earned her master's degree in sustainability and human behavior change from the University of Michigan and remains intentional and positive about the power of people to create social movements for change, no matter how powerful the oppositional forces. As a mother and human, she fights to hold those responsible for the current climate emergency accountable and envisions a beautiful and deeply meaningful future centered on connection and community rather than individualism and accumulation of wealth. She has been fiercely advocating for the Packaging Reduction Act in New York since it was introduced 4 years ago through Beyond Plastics and has educated thousands about the single-use plastics crisis as a certified Beyond Plastics speaker. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Rachna.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Let me just get my presentation going. Okay, perfect. Okay. And I will try my best to keep an eye on the chat, but the way my computer is configured, it's not the easiest thing for me, but we'll try our best to answer every question at the end. So keep them coming. You can keep them coming in the chat and we'll come back to them if anything. But yes, thank you so much for the introduction and hello to everyone on this call. My name is Rachana Shah, and as mentioned, I'm a zero waste consultant and educator. I've been doing it since 2018 when job and that title simply didn't exist. But I knew very much that that's what I wanted to do because I just realized the connection between this being such a low-hanging fruit solution to the climate crisis, but that it also had all these other benefits on the side about meaningfulness that she mentioned. So I hope I get some time to get into that. But I also wanted today to talk about, the plastics role in the climate crisis, kind of the health crisis that's now emerged with a lot of new research, but also how we can just practically limit our exposure because there's a little bit of nihilism on what I see with regards to plastic. Like, there's no way we can avoid it, so might as well not even try. But I'm here to tell you that every bit that we try to lower our exposure, I think does matter from everything that I've read and I've heard of with to this. Okay, so let's talk about that problem, as I mentioned. So more than 11 billion metric tons of plastic have been produced since 1950. And the reason this stat is important is because all of that is still around today. I'm sure many of you know that plastic has a 500,000 year time frame for when it degrades, but it actually never really does because it's an inorganic material. And so all of this plastic that has been around since that time and that continues to be made is still around and will continue to be around for our children's generation and their children's and beyond that for several generations. Also, that number is a little bit hard to quantify. So that is the weight of more than 100 moons. It's a massive amount of plastic. It's also twice the weight of all animals alive today, from insects through mammals, including humans and including livestock, which is just such a there's a lot of dissonance with that statistic in my mind that we have more plastic than we do um, living beings. So now if you want to, in the chat or just in your head, take a guess, what percentage of current production is packaging related? So I'll just give everyone a couple seconds if they want to guess that of all the plastic made, what percent is used for packaging? Okay. Ooh, we got a big number. Okay, everyone's on the right path that that it is a big number, but it's actually not that high as some of the guesses. The answer is about 42% of plastic. Now, there's so much plastic that's used in home goods and other things that's not the packaging of those goods. So that's kind of where the split comes off. But 42 just for packaging, just for getting something to our homes, just so that we can open it and throw it out is pretty massive as well. Especially these in the middle when there's such a big amount of plastic compared to the actual product also is very alarming. Okay. And then if you look at this growth chart for how plastics, when it started in the 50s, it was a moderate amount, and it grew to a moderate amount. But then you'll kind of see that since the year 2000, it's doubled from 200 million tons to over 400 million. And if you kind of keep going with this at the rate that it's going, it's more of an exponential curve. So this dot represents the "you are here" moment. But you can see now, it like beyond that, it is just skyrocketing up here. And so for folks that care about the environment, this is a really alarming chart. But for others, this is this is where a lot of money can be made. A lot of money. Okay. There was an article written that at the current rates, plastic production emissions could triple. And that means that it would be 1/5 of the Earth's carbon budget by 2050. And trying to think of children in our life that are like younger and what age they might be in 30 years or so, um, that is an alarming rate of growth. And how much of the carbon budget will just be for plastics is like very it's just very hard to wrap our heads around, and it's something that should really call for us to take action. And so the invention of the ship was the invention of the shipwreck. So very quickly, I'm going to tell you a briefly about where we are and how it came to be this way. So basically, when you walk into a grocery store, it is, in my opinion, impossible to avoid plastic completely. We have come to such a place where plastic is used to contain almost everything that is at the grocery store. Sure, there's some glass and a little bit of metal, maybe, but generally speaking, a lot of food is wrapped in plastic, whether it's the soft film or the more rigid kind. So I don't think anyone could win a no plastic grocery challenge. It's in so many things, as I mentioned. It's in furniture, it's in our phones, it's obviously like single-use water bottles or other drink bottles. Lego, if you have kids like me, we see a lot of these. And things that we use every day, like our cars and our TVs. But it's also kind of in a very surreptitious way. It's in things that we may not think of. There's plastic in paint. There's actually plastic in gum. This one alarms me a lot. Most gums are now have some amount of plastic in them. It's in these little stickers that tell us what the fruits are. And there's been some pushing to make this more biodegradable, so especially for cities that are already composting, because a lot of people don't take those off, but as of now, it's a contaminant into the compost stream. It's in these like coffee cups where the outside is paper, but the inside lining, if without that lining, the coffee or the beverage in the cup would just soak right through, unless you drank it very, very quickly. So in a way, it needs to be there for that to work, but it's in there. It's in glue. It's in these wipes. That's also a big contaminant of compost streams. It's in many tea bags, often not usually the ones that look like this or this, but most definitely the ones that look like this. And you can kind of feel them, or if they're damp at waste audits, we like tear them when they're damp. If they tear, they're usually made from paper, and if they don't, they're made from plastic. And you'll see those are just unrippable. And it's also one of the linings of these cartons, the Tetra Packs. It's also in the lining of cans. Without it, the food or drink might taste too metallic. So it does serve a purpose, but in many of the other things, it doesn't seem to serve any purpose at all. Or if it does, it's not as important as maybe that purpose. So you'll see we're kind of like a fish where they're like, "Hey fish, how's the water?" And the fish is like, "What water?" Because it's all around it. It's kind of that situation with plastic. It is all around us. It's very, very difficult to avoid. And then going back just very briefly, plastic was in the beginning, it was a really revolutionary material. It was actually helped us during wartime when parachutes used to be made from like silk or materials that were really hard to like get enough of it to make as much as is needed for a war. That's when nylon came into the picture, and we were able to use parachutes made out of nylon. So it was like very helpful. Or those windshields in the small airplanes, when we could start making them out of plexiglass, that actually helped us a lot. And finally, um, radar, these wires were wrapped and insulated in plastic. And some people say that radar actually helped us win the war. Like that technology was one of the key things. So this was a hugely beneficial material. And they knew it, but they also knew that once the war was wrapping down, that they were going to lose their market, and they wanted to think of new things that they could use with this amazing material that they discovered. Of course, the role that advertising played in this, plastics as American as apple pie, that couldn't be more true. But a lot of that was made this way because this kind of static relationship with advertising. But still, even at this point, their main target for Tupperware, which was one of the first kind of like commercial products, was the target was housewives, and they were just not liking this material. They said that it felt kind of squeaky. They said that they didn't like the smell of it. They just didn't like it. They were not familiar with it. So that's when it was introduced, these Tupperware parties. These two pictures on the left is from the TV show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and the ones on the right are from real Tupperware parties. Just showing that there needed to be a bit of education towards these housewives to show them how revolutionary this product was, how it would make it so that they didn't have to wash a mountain of dishes, or that if they did, it was like much easier for them. And basically, they used this like the friendship and intimacy between a group of women to sell products, and it started proliferating very quickly thereafter. The reason I talk about this right now is because to me this is actually a point of inspiration. This tells me that this was a material that it had to be learned to like this material, and therefore it can be unlearned, right? So let's just kind of use that as a point of inspiration to say, like, hey, if we can do a similar thing along the lines of explaining to folks that this no longer is a beneficial material, maybe we can make some change. Okay, so plastics are made from blank and blank. So these are two very broad categories, but if you want to guess in the chat, what are these two broad categories that I'm kind of talking about here? What is plastic made out of? Often we will get the ingredients list that tells you the ingredients in the beverage, if you got like iced tea, for example. But what is the bottle made from? And the reason that matters is going to be apparent momentarily. So plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. Yes, very good, very good. Um, so those are the two main broad categories. So it used to be made from like oil or petroleum, like the liquid version of fossil fuels, and now it's more frequently made from ethane gas, a gas. So either one, any one of them, fossil fuels are extracted from the ground, but then how do we turn this liquid or gas into like a bottle? They do that using a slew of chemicals that are additives, and that's actually what makes plastic useful. Without them, you wouldn't have plastics. Okay, so those chemicals, it should be known. As of now, there's been identified by Plastchem about 16,000. The circle represents 16,000 chemicals that could be or are currently being used in a variety of different chemicals. Some chemicals are used to make a bottle like plastic clear versus a color. Some chemicals are used to make it very hard and rigid so that you could knock on it versus very soft and pliable and bendy. As well as like how shiny it is, or many other properties are all determined by that mix of chemicals that are going into the plastic. Um, but of these 16,000 chemicals, this part in yellow represents about a quarter of them that have actually been studied. So about 4,000. Of these 4,000, um, about 3,000 are classified, or sorry, 4,000 are classified as hazardous. So that represents 25% of this circle. And the other about 1,000 that are less hazardous. And then this blue area represents chemicals that have not been all. And so I was actually just in Europe. I just flew back yesterday. And I saw I saw the future. I saw that, they live in a society where plastic is not so prevalent. But they also live in a society, generally speaking, where the precautionary principle is in place, meaning companies have to generally prove that something is not toxic before it's put out onto the market. Whereas in America, things are allowed to be put onto the out into the market, and then if they cause harm later on and after usually lawsuits or something of the sort, then change can be made after damage has already been done. And I personally don't think that's a good philosophy when it comes to people's health. um Okay, and then just very quickly, this cracking happens because methane gas, which is the gas used primarily in single-use plastics, is you get it from fracking. Fracking is when you use high pressure and you inject it in through these pipes into the ground so that it fractures the rock below. And then that gas that releases from that fracking, from that cracking, is the ethane gas, and that can is harnessed and captured. But as you'll see, um these pipes go through people's drinking water supplies, and so if there is a leak, which there inevitably will be, that's how a lot of drinking water can get contaminated. So beyond it just being polluting, very energy intensive, and it uses high heat, it's also, environmental justice concerns. And then once they harness or gather the ethane gas, they truck it to another facility that looks like this. And this is by far and away in poor income or Black and brown communities. This is the ethane cracker plant where they crack the ethane gas, they add the chemicals, and they turn it into these tiny little plastic nurdles. And that's what they sell to corporations because they can melt it and shape it into whatever form that they need. So this is really problematic and basically one of the most highly polluting parts of the whole plastic making process. Where's the plastic going? The majority is getting landfilled, and some is getting combusted, but you'll see this teeny tiny, minuscule little sliver that is saying what is getting recycled. So not very much is getting recycled. If you compare this to glass and metal, where there's like a effective rate of about 70%, give or take based on where it is, 70, this is about 6% of the total plastic that's being made. So very ineffective. And yet we still keep using something so ineffective, and so very harmful as well. A lot of this also ends up oceans. Much of it is litter. Art didn't really capture it, but 18 million tons of it enters our ocean. And a lot of that is because of litter on our streets. It gets washed away into our sewer systems, and then our sewer systems connect into larger bodies of water and often make it out into the ocean as well. This is why we have those gigantic plastic gyres that are just bigger than Texas, or bigger than France, because due to the ocean currents, that's where all this stuff gathers. And then this visualization kind of blew my mind, but here's our beloved Manhattan right here. You see the outline. This is how tall the mountain of plastic water bottles that we have thus far produced in the last 10 years. Sorry, not total, just in the last 10 years. 4 trillion bottles would dwarf the Empire State Building or the Freedom Tower. It's just such a huge quantity, and sometimes it's so difficult to grasp how big it is. And you may have seen this already, but based on these emissions that we've talked about, plastic is actually the fifth largest polluter after these four countries, if it was a country. So that is an insane amount of greenhouse gases to release. Um, Also, as we know, everyone in this group, I don't need to say it, but it used to be when I gave these talks many years ago that the climate crisis was affecting people a little bit far away, and now it's very much here, right? So the urgency is super high. Um, and as we electrify as a nation, as we go electrify our cars, we electrify our heating and cooling and our cooking, um, and although slow, it is like spreading. This plastics is very much the fossil fuel industry's plan B. It is very much, and you saw that growth curve that went straight up. This is where they see the money coming in. This is where they want to keep us locked in. There's also a huge amount of environmental justice concerns. I'm sorry this is kind of small, but I'll just read it to you all. If this represents all of our US plastic waste exports, this was in 2021, so maybe different now, but some went to Canada and some went to Mexico, but the rest of these, Malaysia, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Turkey, El Salvador, are all overexploited nations, basically, for the most part. And many or all of these places do not have the type of technology that we do to deal with, even just to recycle 6 to 10% of plastics. And so a lot of times the plastic gets burned or incinerated because just the mountain of trash that it is there, it becomes so like, look at this, you know, this is the way it kind of just overwhelms these communities. And so burning it is a way, is a way they think that they can at least reduce the quantity, but then what's kind of going into the air and the kind of birds that we do incinerating facilities. So that means these really bad, like heavy metals and toxins, dioxins, and black carbon, which is 5,000 times as potent as carbon dioxide, is going into the air and causing birth defects and all sorts of really horrible outcomes for the people in these communities. And also, it's not even just other countries, it's also cities and counties within our country that are, generally speaking, low income or black and brown or just overexploited areas like St. James in Louisiana, and they created this organization called Rise St. James, and I strongly recommend you look them up, give them a follow. They are just highlighting a lot of the issues that, that they face. They even say, like, if you fly there, they always invite people to come visit them. It's something I really want to do at some point. But they say that when you arrive, as soon as you open the car door, you immediately smell this smell, and oftentimes people get headaches after being there for just a few hours. So this is like so close to home, and it's something that needs addressing. And it's also moving into Appalachia a lot now too. Um, there's many kind of chemical or oil refineries or plastic production plants that already have approval to be built or already have been built there. Um, and COVID, it was, as a zero waste consultant, I see all the time the residue, if you will, of the COVID mentality that, oh, something is only hygienic if it's single-use plastic versus a reusable thing. That's been a really, really difficult thing for us to educate folks on, because at the end of the day, the high heat that's used in dishwashers would certainly kill like all sorts of viruses that were there. And so educating folks on that has been a big challenge. Uh, Plastics, you all have definitely heard and know about this, but just to define it, is a particle that's smaller than 5 millimeters. And what happens is, like, because these are made from an inorganic substance, which is fossil fuels, they never, unlike paper just eventually degrades and returns back to Earth. But plastic just breaks into these teeny tiny little shards that are so small, and therefore they are so sticky. I call them sticky. They just kind of get into everything. They get into soils. They get into into the air, and they get into our bodies eventually. So this is what I mean. This is a microplastic filament on a snowflake. So it's kind of like snowing down from the sky. And this is a microplastic that was observed in the uptake in plants. So one of the problems right now is that the microplastics are in our soils. And so this is how they might actually get into our foods. Although this is not the primary way, but just to show how, visceral this is. This is the body of an insect in the Adirondacks, and it's covered. It's covered in microplastics. Um, and there's better technology. So the research has grown a lot in the last like 5, 10 years. It used to be, I mean, when they were trying to count microplastics, I think it was like literally counting them once they were magnified. Now they have different technology and lasers that can kind of count and detect microplastics so they can get more accurate reads. It turned out bottled water can contain hundreds of thousands of nanoplastics. And also, it's not even just seafood. It's even like plant-based meat can sometimes have it because that is a more processed food. And processed food just means it's kind of it has more steps before it gets to your plate. And the more steps it has, the more plastic something can be wrapped in. And that's kind of why processed food has, generally speaking, has more microplastics. And then, so this is a little bit of the alarming part, and many of you may know this, but it would be remiss. What has happened now, because these microplastics are so prevalent, because only 6% of such of 11 million tons has been recycled. All the rest of that will eventually degrade and turn into microplastics. And then that kind of goes, if it's landfilled, it's going to go into our soils or in our waters. If it's burned, it's going to go into our air. Like it's all going around. And for that reason, we're a very alarming place in life where microplastics have been found in babies that are born before they take their first breath. They have microplastics in their bodies. It's been found on the maternal and the fetal side of the placenta. That stat always kind of is jarring to me, and I've said it many times. So I like to include a little hedgehog here as like a reset. So if anyone needs to take a breath and look at how cute that hedgehog is, if that helps, I hope it does, because it helps me. That last stat is a little bit tough. Okay, moving on. So thinking about the other things that are in plastics besides the so there's the microplastic side from the fossil fuels piece, and then the chemical side is this kind of cocktail of chemical contaminants, anything from phthalates to methyl mercury, DDTs, um, bisphenols, all these things have different effects, as I said earlier. Styrenes, those are going to be found in your styrofoam. Um, well, a lot of these chemicals do is affect our endocrine system. And when I went to the Plastics and Public Health Symposium for the second time at NYU, and that's a whole bunch of just doctors and scientists and some activists, they said that this is the most alarming piece to them, because our endocrine system is our on-off switches, right? It dictates how our bodies kind of grow or move, or not move, but like how they grow. And when messing with our endocrine system, and I'll quote them, they said the endocrine system is not, it's not the, it's not, it's not the only thing, it's everything, right? It's everything. So these are things that, dictate our reproductive system, that our kidneys, our pancreas, the things that process our things in our bodies, our hormones, our sweating, um, all of those things are kind of dictated by our endocrine. So we don't want anything messing with that at all. This is just to show you how it works. So this would be a hormone in orange, and this would be a receptor. And what these chemicals do is they act as endocrine disruptors, and they come in and they act like they're the hormone. So they might turn something on that was not meant to turn on. And that's the way they sneak in. And so this is, this shows a picture of frogs that had been shown to have deformities after being exposed to these endocrine disrupting chemicals. EDCs, I might say, because it's a mouthful. Another thing that's important to say is that low doses matter. Um, and so I'll come back to that, but this is an important point. Um, it's not that you have to like be super duper exposed like those folks in St. James. Even just our day-to-day interactions can have an effect on our health. So things like children's toys that might have phthalates, BPAs might be in certain bottles, plastic bottles. Cleaning products may have phthalates. Even our house dust, that has things that have like come into the air. Um, a lot of furniture has flame retardants. And PFAS isn't anything that where the machinery especially needed some sort of lubrication. So anything that's like in a roll, that means like a machine put it into a roll, and that machine needs to be lubricated. So often that lubrication is a PFAS, and then that like in trace amounts gets into those products. So I think of like toilet paper, right? All right, and there's more there you can see. Plastic has been researched to been shown in clogged arteries. And the one of the most alarming ones is that there's studies that have shown that um, the nanoplastics, the really, really small microscopic ones, have, when very small, have been shown to cross the brain blood barrier. Up one study said it was as much as the weight of one plastic spoon, which is 7 grams. But without being fixated on the exact amount, the point is that some has penetrated what was thought to be like an impenetrable barrier. And that's also very alarming. I'm going to skip this one for time. And so a lot of the emphasis is like on our personal responsibility, like you need to recycle more, and it's on you and you need to do less, right? Don't litter. So a lot of that's been a lot of the strategy is to place the blame on us, and that's why extended producer responsibility laws are really important because it shifts the blame and the responsibility really back onto the producer. It's also important to know that only 100 companies produce 90% of the world's single-use plastics. Um, Look at the top of this list: ExxonMobil, Dow, all these big like petro companies. And so we could probably make a lot more impact by targeting these companies and organizing to target them rather than on individuals to shift over. But there's benefits in both. Point being, we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. These, at the end of the day, these triangles are at the bottom of the plastic is just a resin code, and it's caused so much confusion with folks, and we've invested so much, obviously just money as a society, but just also so much of our time and brain space. And I see to this day a lot of children's things are focused on, well, just make sure you recycle more. And recycling is just, especially with plastics, is not going to get us out of this hole. And this awareness reached a point where in California, the Attorney General has sued ExxonMobil because, similar to the tobacco industry, they knew that plastics recycling was a scam, and yet they still kind of pushed it out on all of us. So that is still ongoing. And even in New York, after doing a waste study of waste that passed through the Hudson River, the largest percentage of it was PepsiCo products, not just the beverage, but all products. And so that was used in a court case where our Attorney General, Letitia James, sued Pepsi over their plastic packaging. I believe this was dismissed, but it's just still an interesting case study if anyone wants to look into it. And then a lot of times there's like these false solutions. I hear a lot about um, oh, let's just burn all our plastic in some fancy $11 billion chamber with no oxygen and call it pyrolysis or call it chemical recycling, because out of this hugely expensive, inefficient process, we're only going to get a little bit more fossil fuel, a little bit more to, to just pollute our air even more. So all of it, you have to be extremely skeptical about any solution that's pushed by on the supplier side, because it's just very it's not it's not really the case. And I'm not just saying this. So if you went to beyondplastics.org in the learn section, there's a whole report on chemical recycling and the fact that if you look at all of the ones that are open today, and there's not that many, they have very, very inefficient outcomes. They're just not doing it. And yet this technology, which is very expensive and taxpayer funded, if passed, are just not the solutions that we need. So I urge you just to be skeptical about any of these types of things. So I'm going to break out our solutions into systemic, because so if you really want to think about what can I do, because this problem is really big, it's really big. And if it's the fossil fuel industry's new plan A, you know that it's just a huge mountain to climb. But I mean, we like to climb mountains, right? And like physically, so why not do it in this capacity? So we really have to think about systemic solutions as well as individual and community solutions. I think one without the other is not as effective. So if you only walked away from this presentation doing one suggestion, let it be one in this section and one in the section on individual solutions. So the systemic one, the easiest way to stop the plastic pollution problem is to stop making plastics. We really need to do that ASAP, but I think we all know that that's not a realistic thing at this moment. So while protesting, because a lot of this stuff is going to affect the next generation's water, their climate, so much more than it's already affecting us now. So while protesting is extremely important, I also want to say that at places that we have influence, so our places of work, our schools and our community centers. As a zero waste consultant, much of my work started from one person who'd worked at their company, who looked up a solution to, let's say this was the problem. You still have plastic cutlery at whatever. It could be work, it could be at your church, anywhere. One person that just did a little bit of research and and I also recommend start a green team alone. And even if it's just 2 or 3 people, if you can try to get one person at a little bit of a higher level, but I have seen what small green teams can do. And then it's gone to the point where they would bring in a consultant because everyone was really on board for these solutions. So green teams and speaking up and being that, squeaky wheel, because that's the only one that's going to get the grease. And then also using social media to benefit us by calling out corporations and government officials that don't do what they say. Like Coca-Cola is a hugely guilty company because they have made so many pledges to have more recycled content or whatnot. And then they just blow through them. Like the date they say they're going to do it by like just passes and it just doesn't get done. And we need more people calling out companies that are doing this, as well as praising companies and government officials that are doing the right thing. That's really important too. And then finally, join a local organization. You're all here. I don't need to tell you that, but if you want to get more deep on the plastic situation specifically, I would recommend Beyond Plastics, the Plastic Pollution Coalition. Gaia is specifically about incineration, and especially of plastic. So that's a good one. And then if you care about plastic at beaches, then Surf Rider's a really good one too. But this is like, we live in New York, and New York has introduced the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, which we like to call PREA because it's a little bit easier to say. And this one is a game changer. This would be the strongest EPR, extended producer responsibility legislation in the entire country. And what it would do is it says that anyone that sells anything in New York State that's in packaging has to reduce that packaging by 30%, but you have 12 years to do so. And there's certain benchmarks along the way. So within 2 years, you'd have to do, I think, like 6%. And then within the next 2 years, but you'd have to get to a 12% reduction. And I may have the numbers a bit wrong, but the point is it's a phased in approach. So it's a very thoughtfully written bill, and it's trying to be fair to producers as well. It's not trying to mandate a huge change in a short amount of time. Well, it would achieve a 70% recycling rate across the board, right? So it would go from the abysmal 6% that is currently existing for plastics to a much higher recycling rate. It would make the brands pay the municipalities for the waste management, and also it would reduce toxic chemicals. So basically it would ban about 14 or so of the most toxic chemicals that are currently still being allowed to be put into our plastic packaging, much of which may touch food or beverages. So like, and this is like lead is on there, and like heavy metals are on there. So this is kind of a no-brainer. I wish it was a longer list, to be honest, but let's just get rid of the ones that are 100% known risk. So this is me. I took my daughters up to Albany one year. But if you get involved in, and at least in Beyond Plastic's effort to do this, oftentimes it's signing a quick petition, or helping to schedule a meeting, which someone like myself would go in and do a lot of this kind of the talking about this to the legislator, but just telling them that as a constituent, you don't want to see this. You want to see our state be a leader in this space, and you want to see less plastic pollution. So we have a biweekly meeting every Tuesday at 6 p.m. And so if you can email Alexis if you want to join that. That is Stacy Pfeffer Amato. She's one of the assembly members in the Rockaways in Queens. And we thought she'd be a very easy person to convince because there's so much plastic pollution and waste on the beaches. But and I don't have time to really delve into it, but she was actually on the fence a bunch. So and bringing my kids and helping her understand that this is going to affect them actually helped her get on board at this point in the process. So Beyond Plastics, has this grassroots advocacy training. So I encourage you all to just check that out. It's just a 2-hour online training, and it'll kind of get you equipped on how you can help, again, in our local spheres of influence. And then, by the way, I'll put all these, someone will put all these links in the chat again later, so you don't have to scramble. So yeah, this is more about that training. And then finally, the real solutions, the more personal ones. So for health, we want to limit our exposure to plastics, right? So just like sun exposure, like we have had so much more advances in how we think about sun exposure. Oh, what time is it? Okay, I need to wrap up. Okay. But um but if we forget to wear our sunscreen one day, we also know, like, okay, that's not the greatest thing, but it just means tomorrow we're going to remember. So that is kind of the frame I want you to think about microplastics exposure. Um, from the things that I have learned over the last 5-6 years, really deep diving into plastics, is there's a chance this may be the new asbestos or lead, as in this may be something where, again, as I talked about, it's not the precautionary principle, but it's something that we may find out in a decade or two that, you know, exposure to this may cause long-term damage. So that's just what I want. This is what I've learned since I've gotten involved in this. This is not from any scientist or doctor, but this is it's yeah, and even if it's not, like, this is the way it works in this country, unfortunately, and I'd love to try to change that. But that being said, I really want to avoid anyone to like become very obsessed with this or think like too much about this, because we are very much around it. Just focus on what you can do in the moment. And I'm going to give you some tips for how to do that. So, um, okay, I'm going to skip this. So the situation, okay, this is, guys, I tried really hard to come up with like an acronym and this is the best I could do. If someone has a better one, I'm so excited to hear it. But the situation is sad, as we've kind of talked about. Awareness means it's only half sad. Okay. So this is my acronym to help you guys remember. It helps me. So at least it works. But I'll show you what I mean. So H is for heat, A is for acid, is for fat. The second F is for friction. The S and the A are for surface area. And the D is for duration. All right. So this is literally what I use this acronym to help me in figuring out where I want to use my limited like a brain power. Okay, so for heat, this is the most important, I think, of all of them. Heat accelerates the transfers of chemicals and microplastics into your foods and beverages. So do not ever microwave plastic. Do not put plastic in the dishwasher. Avoid takeout. So this one's really hard. I get it. I totally get it. And I know this is not going to be possible all the time, but I encourage you to, if you're going to a place every week, you're giving that restaurant a lot of business. So you can talk to them and say, what could I bring my own container? Would you mind putting the food in there? Some places I have done that for me and others haven't. So the other alternative is ordering at a restaurant in a for here plate, which is made from, glass or ceramic, and then using your metal fork to scoop it into your own container. All right. So that's like a big tip. Plastic utensils in hot foods as well. Like this is just heat is one of the most important, or avoiding heat and plastics. Avoid hot liquids and takeaway cups. That's our coffees, right? But once you get into the habit of bringing your reusable coffee cup to you, like you will find that it's not as hard to forget as you once maybe thought in the beginning. And I still do use plastic from time. It is still a useful container or material. So I tend to use that for more dry and colder foods that I'm going to either put in the fridge or freezer. So acid and fat, acidic and fatty foods also accelerate the transfer of chemicals. And so that's micro and nanoplastics, if you see that acronym, MNPs. So you just want to store acidic and fatty foods in glass or metal or silicone when possible. And purchase these types of foods in glass, metal, or even like paper if they're in a box or something, if available. It's just something I like to keep in mind when I'm trying to figure out which container to grab. We're going to come back to friction, the second F. Surface area and duration. So the higher the rate of the surface area to the food beverage, that accelerates the transfer of chemicals and micro nanoplastics. So this just means if you're a parent, for example, it's better to buy a large juice in a plastic bottle as opposed to the small juice boxes, because there's more surface area per unit of liquid. Also longer duration. So this is when I get very wary when I see like big thingies of plastic water bottles at stores, and I sometimes you wonder like how long has that been there? Because the longer it's been there, the more microplastics and chemicals that could have leached into the beverage. And then sometimes when if I have the time, I'll get home, I'll transfer it out of the plastic container and into the non-plastic one, like as soon as I get home. Okay, so now talking about, so those were all about kind of food and food containers. The friction one is kind of just a general thing about friction from any like any kind of friction of plastic on plastic or plastic on something else is going to release these little microplastics or nanoplastics. So cutting boards, plastic cutting boards comes to mind immediately. When you open a water bottle and there's that friction against the cap against the thing that holds it in place, that's friction, right? And this is the reason bottled water has more microplastics or twice as many is because of that friction created from opening the cap. Synthetic clothes like polyester or polyester blankets. Every time you kind of shake out a polyester blanket, little microplastics are going to shed from that blanket, or that shirt, or those. A lot of our workout gear is made from synthetics, right? So just something to bear in mind. And then be aware of the environmental justice issues of tire friction. So the biggest way that we breathe in microplastics is from in the air, and that's from tires are made with plastic now. They used to be only rubber. That was also problematic for other reasons, but now they have plastic in them. So every time a tire rolls on the road, it is releasing behind it all these micro and nanoplastics. So just kind of keeping that in mind. And if you have the means, you can use an air filter at home. And I think I'm just going to wrap up now. This is a book that you can read more about it. And just remember that individual actions often lead to community level actions, which lead to the system change that we so desperately need. So we need them all, not just one. So I'm going to end it there. I'm so sorry I went a little over what I had planned, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Amazing. So good,
I'm so
Rachna.
sorry.
No, that
I
was
get so
tremendous.
into it.
I loved it. Are there any questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourselves. You were quite comprehensive. I really personally appreciate it because I learned a lot myself. Um,
Yeah, it took me, and I just also want to say, like, it took me at least 3 years to make most of those changes. So don't think like it's not easy to just switch. Like,
yeah.
and it's expensive sometimes to buy new containers or new things or new workout gear that's made out of bamboo or whatever.
Mm.
It's not easy. So give yourselves grace that
Mhm,
awareness is step one, and then like making the changes slowly is step two.
mhm. I appreciate you being specific and detailed though with things even just the the size of the packaging, or maybe we can start to reduce it, whether something is more acidic than another thing. Like there are
Yeah.
different entries into where we can maybe easier, make cuts in an easier way.
That's why I
Um,
did this, because I'm like, I'm not going to always remember, but then I'm like, if I have to put away
surface area.
yeah, if I want to put away butter and lettuce that I cut up, and I have one of each container, now I know which one I'm going to put in which.
Right, right.
So, I think this one skipped by accident, but you guys can just read
Mm.
it. But yeah, I'm sorry I went over. I feel
No.
terrible.
Yeah. I
But
also
yes, and
sorry.
anyone is, if my email is on there, you can reach out to me directly as well. And it's
Yes.
rachna@aspire2zero.com.
Great. And we have a comment in the chat from Ariadne. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. It says that this presentation is extremely important, which I agree, educational and efficient. So they thank you very much. And I also extend my thanks for all of your activism on different scales, because I think that that's an important detail as well on an individual level and then as a collective. And the fact that you do so much with your children too and at their school and in Albany, there's a place for all of that activism. And so I appreciate what you do
I
personally. And
mean,
this group, I think, really likes that too.
yeah. And somebody asked me this weekend when I was in Europe, what motivates me the most. And I said, my children. And I said all this stuff. And then at the end, I said, and honestly, we can't let these people go unaccountable for what they're doing.
Yeah.
That really motivates me. I mean, it's not right what's happening. We shouldn't poison people, like, so holding them accountable is a really strong driving point for me, at least.
Mhm.
But thank you everyone for your time and
Thank you.
attention. It's
Thank you.
and
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Rachana.
you're so welcome.
Okay. All right.
All right, everyone.
All right. We'll